To wrap up this show, we're going to be talking about these expectations for finally another quarterback battle in San Francisco. We got Jimmy Garoppolo just showed up. I think it was 2 days ago. Get his $600,000 workout check. Always nice to cash that one in. And then Trey Lance, who his motion is looking a little bit more refined. Still a little bit of some accuracy issues, but he's a guy that's gonna really change the way this offense looks. So, Aiden, you started out, man. What are just your overall expectations for this, training camp quarterback battle between Lance and Garoppolo?
Yeah, I want to preface this by saying I do expect Jimmy to be the starter in week 1, but over the last couple of days, I've been thinking that Lance has a very realistic shot of winning this battle. We had Grant Cohn on the show a couple months ago, and he was saying that Jimmy looks horrible during practice, and Lance is a guy who is fine checking down. He had no turnovers his first full year as a starter, and had over the last 2 years has the least amount of turnover worthy plays or something like that. He's a guy who will make good decisions with the ball. And as we know, Shanahan really values taking care of the ball. And if Jimmy throws into triple coverage and makes a bad decision, I could see him being like, screw this. I will take a few rookie mistakes over wasting a drive or two per game, because he won't take the check down or something like that. And also Lance adds a completely new element with his legs. I think even if he's not the week 1 starter, we should see him in 15 out of the 17 games in some capacity. But I still expect Jimmy to be the week 1 starter, but I'm warming to the idea that Lance has a realistic shot, and if he plays well during camp, I would not be surprised if he's the week 1 starter either.
Yeah, and I've said it before. I mean, I feel the same way. I've definitely since they drafted Lance, and I'll say this, I have massive expectations for Lance coming out of college. I think he's going to be a fantastic pro in terms of his career. I think he's going to be a very, very good quarterback. For this first year, since they drafted him, kind of since the draft process, I've expected them to go into the season and in their mind, they want Jimmy to start the whole year. Similar to what the Chiefs did with Alex Smith, where he started the whole year, and then Mahomes got that game at the end of the year, which also, just side note, he looked damn good in that game against the Broncos. I remember watching that like, hey, this guy looks really good. Like maybe he will be the starter next year. And then, everything with Mahomes happens, which was cool to see. But I think that we should expect something similar to that. Now, with that said, I said this a while back where I was like, I think Jimmy's going to be the starter, and a lot of people don't think that. I think it's a lot closer than I initially expected it to be, and I think the decision-making has to be a big part of that, especially because you look at what kind of gets the what gets like Kyle frustrated with Jimmy, and a lot of it's, and we were talking about it just before we hopped on. I don't know how we got in this conversation. We were talking about the Dolphins game last year, where it looked like Jimmy just throwing up like 3 flies up to the Dolphins defensive backs in that game, and it was brutal. But I mean, we've seen the offense can look great with Jimmy. He can run the offense. He changes. He's very good at the line of scrimmage at adjusting the plays and changing and audibling and stuff like that. But you look at his 2019 year, threw 27 touchdowns. It's pretty solid. But he threw 13 picks. And what we've seen from Lance is that at least early on, I mean, in his North Dakota State career, and also through one mini camp practice, so very small sample size. But he's a guy that doesn't seem to want to he doesn't want to force the ball. He'll check it down, and he'll make his money on big plays. And that's what North Dakota State did a lot of the times. Slowly moving the ball, and then boom, 50-yard touchdown, whatever it is. And he's able to make these incredible throws and these incredible running plays where he can just have a massive play. So he's relying more on these big plays, and the thing about the Niners offense is that's what they do as well. Look at all these 80-yard rushing touchdowns that they have at the beginning of games. Look at all these 60-yard George Kittle's touchdowns where, he's falling down and, running, crawling on the ground, and then he gets up and runs for, 70 yards for a touchdown. Getting did he have 200 yards in the first half a couple years back against the Broncos? Yeah. Just crazy big explosive plays. But Lance doesn't force the ball to have those mistakes. And I think there's a good chance, not a good chance, I think there's a decent enough chance that Kyle goes, we're going to be better with Lance. If we start in week 1, we're going to be better week 6 than we would if we have Jimmy starting week 1. And I totally see that side of the argument. I still wouldn't expect it to happen. But if it does happen, if Lance is the starter week 1, that means that he was very impressive. And if we're 49er fans, expect him to definitely have some moments where it's like, dude, what is he doing? And he looks like a rookie quarterback. But that means that day in and day out, he is looking fantastic, and in both in practice and off the field. So I think if he does end up being the starter, that is like the biggest stock up you could give for Trey Lance, even if he doesn't look good initially, because guess what? It's going to take some time. I mean, it takes some time with a lot of guys. It's pretty rare that you have a guy like Justin Herbert who comes in and, they puncture Tyrod Taylor's lung, and then he comes in and looks fantastic. But with Trey Lance, if he's able to come in and just start from day one, that is something that I was not expecting at all, especially in this pre-draft process. So, I mean, I think there's a chance. I still would expect Jimmy Garoppolo to be the starter. And it's not like he's going to just roll over. Like, he's going to go out there, he's going to look good. But if all of these reports about him, being terrible in practice, everyone knows the 5 interceptions in a row story in practice. Like, if those kind of things arise and he's throwing a lot of picks in practice and Lance isn't, I do think it's kind of hard to look at your team and go, yeah, we're going to go with Jimmy again. And they're going to be like, they've won with Jimmy, so they like Jimmy. That's very clear. But if he's throwing a bunch of picks in practice and Trey Lance isn't, and Trey Lance brings his extra dynamic, it does get a little tough to make Jimmy the starter. And so I think there's a point to that kind of like argument of like, hey, I think Lance should start day 1. Also, a lot of people are very pro of just like, hey, throw the quarterback out there. I don't know if you always do that, but if you think he's ready enough, then I think you do, even if he's not like quite there. If he's like 90% there, like, hey, like he's almost ready to go. Let him go out there. Let him make his adjustments. Let him fail early on. Because, we talked about it before this as well. This is a good division. The Rams are a really good team. The Seahawks and the Cardinals, I don't think they're quite on the level that the Rams and the 49ers are just in terms of their roster. But you got Russell Wilson, you got Kyler Murray in those spots. Like, they're going to be competing every game, So I definitely think that this is a year where even if the Niners decide to go with Lance and it makes him, take a little step back or whatever, I still think it's a big win in terms of Lance's career. And so I'm not against it. I don't expect it to happen, but I'm definitely not against Lance starting week 1.
Yeah, I think another thing to keep in mind is the first 4 games are really manageable. Lions, I feel like you or I could probably come in and play manageable quarterback play. Eagles don't have an awesome defense. Packers have a good defense, but Rodgers is really up in the air. I think you said you don't expect him to play this year. If the Packers do not have Rodgers, that's not a horrible matchup. And then the Seahawks defense, I have no idea who they have playing DB. I guess we go at Akello Witherspoon a little bit. But I don't know. Like those first 4 games, and even the Cardinals game isn't absolutely horrible. Like, that's a pretty manageable starting stretch. It's not like you're coming out against like the Bears later in the season or the Rams. And there's 2 sides to that coin. Maybe you make sure that you get a couple wins with Jimmy under center, or you let Lance come out there and have a little bit more margin of error, and have him figure it out a little bit. But super excited to see what they end up doing.
Yeah, so I think that's probably going to wrap it up for this episode. We just wanted to get some quick stuff out here. I'm going to be recording again later this week and have a guest on, so make sure to stay tuned for that. It should be available on the podcast platform and also on YouTube. And if you're listening on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, make sure to like, comment. Let us know what you think about just any of these topics. But I think that's going to do it for today. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you guys all soon.